Hello everyone, this is Apeksha and today we're going to be discussing about overcoming intrusive thoughts. Now we would have all had moments where a random thought pops up to our mind and then we keep on thinking about it and then we realize, why did this thought even come? And this can happen repeatedly, multiple times, and you can just get upset with life because these thoughts keep coming back to you. So, before understanding how we overcome such intrusive thoughts, we need to start with understanding what these intrusive thoughts are. What do they actually mean? Do they have a hidden purpose that they're going to serve? What is the brain mechanism behind intrusive thoughts? What are certain steps that we can take? Are there different types of intrusive thoughts? And a lot more about intrusive thoughts before moving into how we overcome the entire process of us experiencing intrusive thoughts. Now, coming to the definition of intrusive thoughts, we all understand how intrusive thoughts are one unwanted and the other they're uncontrollable. So, why are they unwanted? Because most of the times you're not able to make sense of the purpose of this thought. Like, why is this thought even coming to me? Now, to give an example, let's say I take the metro home every day from work and I'm standing in front of the metro line waiting for my metro to arrive. And suddenly a thought comes to my mind saying, Apeksha, why don't you jump in front of the metro? Now, this is such an unwanted thought. I'm just finishing my day at work, boring. I have a pretty nice life. I'm happy about the things I'm doing. I'm happy about my work. But then this thought suddenly makes me uncomfortable. It makes me question a lot of things about myself. And suddenly, at a moment where I'm just waiting for a means of transport, why did this thought of dying come to my mind? And these are uncontrollable. I wasn't consciously thinking of dying, nor was I planning to take my own life. There were no thoughts as such. Suddenly, from somewhere, this thought just booms into my mind. And that is why intrusive thoughts are known as intrusive because they're not under our control. And at the same time, they're most of the times not needed to us. And this particular intrusive thought can cause a lot of discomfort to us as individuals. I mean, the thought of dying suddenly comes to your mind, and you just go on about thinking, why did this thought even come to my mind? And that is the reason we need to know the strong voices behind these intrusive thoughts that are the worried voice, the false comfort, and the wise mind. Now, what is the worried voice? The worried voice consists of all your what ifs. So it is about you get a thought, so you have rashes on your hand, and you get a sudden thought, okay, is this some sort of cancer or is this some sort of blood infection? Oh, what if it's an infection? What if I have to get admitted to the hospital for a long time? What will happen to my kids if I go into the hospital? So, all these what ifs form your worried voice. And then we have the false comfort. So, what does false comfort do? It only gives you reassurance. So, because of the reassurance, the thoughts might stop for some amount of time, but this is not going to be for long. And that's why worried voice and false comfort go on an ongoing conversation all the time. So, I have a hand infection, there are rashes on my skin, and now I'm thinking of all the what ifs possible from this being a small infection due to skin cream to me having the most rarest illness possible and I'm going to die the next day. And that is when false comfort pops up and says, hey, it's okay, you can always go to a dermatologist, get yourself checked, get yourself treated. And then again, another of what if comes, asking, but what if the dermatologist says this is not something that he or she can treat and I have to go to the bigger hospital for this? But false comfort again says, can you just stop thinking so much? But the worried voice says, it can't stop thinking. And this is where the wise mind comes up. And the wise mind is that part of your voice which is more mindful, which is more conscious of what's happening with you, and tries to tell you that you need to take a moment away and think about these thoughts objectively. Now, the wise mind does understand that a skin infection has caused you a certain amount of stress, but the wise mind tries to tell you how this is not it. That is, you have to be mindful of the present and then you need to move on. And we'll slowly learn how this can help in overcoming our intrusive thoughts. Moving on, there are certain concepts that we have to know before understanding what intrusive thoughts entirely are. So we now know about the three voices in our mind. The next thing that we'll be talking about is there's a lot of confusion surrounding whether intrusiveness and impulsive behaviors are the same. Now, the slightest or the major difference between these two is that intrusiveness is characterized by over-control. So if you've all heard the common white rabbit or the pink rabbit joke, the more you try not to think of the white rabbit, the more the rabbit comes to your mind. Similarly, when you're putting more control on your thought, the thought keeps popping up because indirectly or in some other way, you're still thinking about the thought. Whereas impulsive behaviors are more related to lower self-regulation. That is, you have lower self-control on what you're trying to do, which might lead to impulsive behaviors. But again, there are certain situations where your thoughts can contribute to impulses, the other way around, everything. But the intrusive thoughts that we are talking about are strictly restricted to situations where these are most of the times not represented in your behaviors. Now, the next concept that we are going to talk about is something called the sticky mind. Now, what is the sticky mind? So, sticky mind has nothing to do with the structure of the brain or any gluey substance in the brain. So, sticky mind is a situation where the thoughts which are supposed to be passing on get stuck in your mind. And this could be because of various situations, such as the two things that are listed below. There is personal experiences, triggers, or us just not being able to let go of the thought for various reasons. Now, a sticky mind again has a lot of factors contributing to it, one being our stressors. So usually when we are very tired or when we are in a stressful situation or we are stressed about something upcoming, our mind tends to be more stickier, not letting the thoughts pass as they have to, but holding on to them. Now, what about personal experiences? Now, let's say yesterday while on my way back home, I witnessed an accident. Now, every time an intrusive thought of getting into an accident comes to me. Now, this is not because entirely there's no reason, because a pedestrian was hit who was just in front of me. And I always have the fear that, oh, it could have actually been me who was hit in the accident. And many such personal experiences contribute to the intrusive thoughts that we might be experiencing. The fourth part is the different triggers and the amount of sensitization our thoughts have to these triggers. Now, I witnessed an accident yesterday. I come home and the next day morning on the TV, there's again news about an accident. So when we are seeing such news items or when we are looking at instances where bad things have happened, you're more sensitized to the fact that, okay, it's such a horrible thing. So horrible things can happen to people at any time. In terms of awareness, yes, we need to be careful, we need to be safe while driving, we need to be safe while crossing the road. That's still okay. But these thoughts go on very extremely, and as we spoke about the three voices keep going on in a loop and a loop and a loop where you do not know when to stop, and that is when the discomfort gets extreme. And now that we know certain concepts from behind what intrusive thoughts could be made of, we'll also understand about the different types of intrusive thoughts. Now, many of us might think that we are the only ones experiencing intrusive thoughts, but definitely not. Every individual would have had some or the other kind of intrusive thought, and that is why we have so many typologies, around 8 to 10 types of intrusive thoughts, which means everybody has experienced these. But why is it more intense to one person and why is it not? We'll surely be learning about it through the next slides. Now, the first type of intrusive thoughts that we'll be speaking about are morally repugnant thoughts. Now, with the word moral coming, we all understand that this has to do something with the morality aspect in our lives. So it might be related to self-harm thoughts, it might be related to sexually immoral acts, it might be related to other things like religion or being non-religious, etc. Now here, a moral judgment comes to our mind whenever this thought loop starts. Now, to give an example about it, somebody has a sudden intrusive thought about a sexual fantasy. Now, they know they're not going to act upon it. They feel very uncomfortable thinking about the entire situation. But somewhere, the morality scale which they have put on themselves tells them that, okay, they're having a very wrong thought and things might go wrong. and which makes the intrusive thoughts more and more and more, and these thoughts keep coming into their mind. The second thought, or the type of intrusive thought that we have, is the big issue thoughts. So now, what are big issue thoughts? So these are related to bigger things like purpose of life, why have been put on this earth, what is life after death. Now, most of these big issues do not have answers. Like, what is my life going to become after death? No matter how much time I spend thinking about it, it is still unknown. Whatever we can read about it are still theories or hypotheses given by people, but there's nothing definite. Now, these are unanswerable questions which make them more difficult. Next comes our sexual orientation and identity related thoughts. Now, this might be related to the individual's questions about their own sexual identity or the sexual orientation that they believe they are in, or they are feeling to be experiencing. So to give an example for this, so for a long time in my life, let's say I have assumed to be a straight person. Now suddenly, due to a work meeting, I go out with a woman for lunch. And we're having a nice time, and she's really pretty looking. I like her company, and I feel like, okay, even if this professional meeting ends here, I really want to keep in touch with her. And the intrusive thought suddenly pops up. Hey, now that you're being interested in her, maybe you're in love with her, or maybe you have a different sexual orientation. Now, these thoughts can be passing thoughts, but when you're having intrusive thoughts, these become stuck in your mind. And this is one example of how sexual orientation or identity related thoughts can cause doubts in your relationship or actually harm healthier relationships. Now, coming to nonsensical thoughts, as the word itself defines, we have mental checks and doubting. Coming to mental checks, a common thing would be us checking on what's happening with us, what's happening around us, and doubting related to relationships. So carrying forward from the previous example I gave, let's say I'm already married and I've been thinking I'm straight. Now, if this is really concern of sexual orientation, there will be other indicators. But the main thing with intrusive thoughts is you somewhere know these are not real, and at the same time you somewhere know that this is causing you a lot of discomfort, and no amount of reassurance, no amount of professional help would have helped you in other terms. Now, continuing this, I might start doubting my relationship with my partner, saying, okay, so I've been in a wrong relationship all the time. No wonder we had arguments every day. So this is not working out, or maybe I have to do something. So these things keep on repeating in our mind. And we'll also be discussing this in the other type of intrusive thoughts, which we'll soon be discussing, called worry. And then we have scrupulous thoughts. Now, scrupulous thoughts are more of judgment oriented. That is, whether I was right or wrong in the situation, and how do I repent to this situation. Now, if it's an immediate thing, let's say I was harsh to a colleague, and I keep getting thoughts about what should I have done, maybe I should have been more nicer to him. Now I can just apologize there or say, okay, sorry, I was having a hard day, and finish it there. But scrupulous thoughts are not that recent most of the times. Most of the times these thoughts will be something which happened in your second grade when you cheated in a test when the whole class was cheating. And suddenly the thought comes to your mind, okay, so far everybody thought I was a very hardworking woman, and I've always been good with my scores, etc. And then I actually cheated on my maths test in second grade. So should I confess this to all my colleagues and redeem myself? So these are the type of intrusive thoughts that will keep coming to your mind if there's something called scrupulous thoughts. Now, coming to the next part, thoughts do not always have to be in the form of thoughts, but they can also be in the form of visual images. Now, coming to visual images, these can be very gory, very scary. And again, to give a very common example, if you've seen a very scary horror movie, and then you're coming back home, lying down, and suddenly when you close your eyes, this image just passes in front of your eyes. You're like, where did this horrifying image even come from? I know I watched a horror movie, I know it's scary, but where did it suddenly come from? So these are the kind of visual images people who are having intrusive thoughts will experience. Or these might be related to, again, your moral thoughts too. That is, you get an image of you standing naked in front of a lot of people. Now, you know you wouldn't be doing something like that. And in case that happens, you know, okay, there might be something else that was happening during that time, but you're not able to, rationalize when you're thinking about it. Now, I did mention worry as an intrusive thought before when we were speaking about doubting relationships. Now, again, in worry, there are different types. So, there is topic specific, there is multi topic worry, and there is meta worry. So, single topic worrying is you're always focused on whether you will be fired from your job. So, this is a single topic. Family wise, probably with your partner, probably with your children, you're actually doing well. But when it comes to your job, you're always on a loop about, okay, so today my manager did not smile at me so well as she always does. So I think there's something coming up. I'm going to get fired. And then we have multi-topic worry. So in multi-topic, what happens is maybe you've recently started a relationship. You're worried about whether your partner likes you. And the second thing is you're in a job for many years, but you're again worried about what's going to happen to the job. And even you're worried about small things like, okay, if I cook this, my partner might not like it, and then I'll have to go and throw it, and then this will hamper my work. So you keep on worrying. And then comes meta worry, which is interestingly us anticipating the worry that we'll be experiencing and worrying about that. So after a certain amount of time has passed with our intrusive thoughts, we kind of know, or we kind of start understanding that these thoughts keep coming up. And that is when we start worrying. Okay, since morning I haven't got an intrusive thought about my girlfriend. Now, what if I get it when I'm having dinner with her? What do I do then? And because of this, you keep worrying, which in turn spoils your relationship again. And then there are not entirely unwanted thoughts. So when you speak about not entirely unwanted, these just have the small role in keeping you comfortable in a particular situation. Now, somebody shouts at you on the road. So you're so angry that a passing thought of, I'm going to take a stone and hit this person on the head comes to your mind. And this is not entirely unwanted in the situation because it's somewhere helping you reduce your anger. But then that is not how intrusive thoughts leave you alone, right? They get stuck in your mind. And then you might start thinking, am I such a horrible person to hit somebody on their head with a stone? What if something happens to a person? And this was such a small incident. I just bumped and he shouted. Do I even have to react so much to it? And then comes thoughts relating to loss or failure. So now these again get connected to the personal experiences part that we previously discussed, where a particular loss, let's say loss of person, loss of a job, or failure in life makes us have intrusive thoughts about ourselves, about the world around us, etc. Finally, we have somatosensory thoughts, and these, as the name suggests, are related to our bodily or organic feelings that we experience. So coming to somatosensory thoughts, all these bodily mechanisms that keep happening, like mouth dryness, for example. So somewhere an intrusive thought comes to your mind saying, okay, I read somewhere that once your mouth starts drying, it's an indication that you're going to die. Now, when this intrusive thought suddenly comes to your mind, you start feeling that your mouth is more drier than it was before. And then your false comfort starts reassuring you, saying, maybe that's for old people or people who are bedridden and not exactly you. You do not have to worry. But the worried voice says, you never know when you're going to die, so you need to be careful. You try to drink water, you try to do other things, but the reassurance is still not there, and the intrusive thought might come up again. Moving on, we also need to understand what our intrusive thoughts are not. But before that, we also need to understand what our thoughts actually comprise of. Now, our thoughts are representations of the world around us. So there are so many things happening around us that from a young age, we have had representations, associations in our mind representing each of these things. So now, if I tell you the word water, you know water is used for drinking, it's used for taking a bath, it's used for cooking, you know, if it's a swimming pool or if it's holy, it's used for playing, etc. So we have certain thoughts regarding everything. And there are experiences that we've had, there are our strong belief systems related to things, and the present moment, whatever is happening around me. So I have a fan on in my room. Now, I know fan is used to give me air and summer, so I need to have a fan on during all the time. So this is just an example of what kind of thoughts that can come to our mind, or what thoughts actually comprise of. Now, what intrusive thoughts exactly are? So we understood how intrusive thoughts suddenly come to your mind. They're not predictable, they're not under your control, and they're not useful to you at all. Now, if I'm sitting here and talking to you people, and I'm thinking about the fan falling on my head, it's not a very realistic thing. I mean, the chances are there that it could happen, but it's not very realistic for me to be thinking about it every time I sit under a fan. Now, many people, or in general, there's a common belief that if we are thinking something, that's a representation of our unconscious, our character, our inner self. Now, I wouldn't say in all situations this is false, but in most situations they definitely are. Because again, thoughts are just thoughts until we act on it, until we have a strong belief system about it, or until there's some kind of psychological disorder which makes us become impulsive because of these thoughts. Now, when we say that our thought reflects our character or our inner self, imagine that you are very uncomfortable with the thought. Now, we did discuss examples, right? Of the thought of dying. I'm very uncomfortable about it. Now I start thinking, okay, if I'm having a thought repeatedly about dying, it means somewhere inside me there is a feeling to die, which is representing my character, which is representing other characteristics like me being negative all the time, me being pessimistic, or me not just being happy with how much I have, dissatisfied. And this might affect my actions. But one thing that we need to remember is, as long as we do not consciously act on these, thoughts are just thoughts. And the moment you know it is an uncomfortable thought, and the moment you realize, okay, this might be legally, morally wrong, the chances of you acting on it will reduce. And many people also start believing that thoughts definitely represent a very sick mind, which is, you're hopeless about it. There cannot be anything done. No changes, nothing. I have to start living with it. But this is not always true. Through professional help or small changes in the patterns that we've been working with our thoughts can bring about a lot of change in whatever we're experiencing. And the last myth is thoughts are always important. Now, yes, sometimes thinking is important. You might get new ideas, your creativity emerges through your thinking, etc. But are they always important? Definitely not. Now, let's say you go to a park and you're sitting there, children are playing, and you suddenly feel it would have been so nice if there was an earthquake now. Everybody would fall under the pit. And immediately your false comfort comes up, your worried voice comes up. Okay, why am I being this bad? Children are playing, enjoying their summer holidays. Why do I want the world to come to an end? And somewhere you start feeling that this is such an important thought because I thought about an earthquake. Is it hinting me something? Is there an earthquake that's going to come? Is there some kind of premonition? But most of the times they're not. These are passing thoughts which just got stuck. Now, this is just a small part about how these intrusive thoughts come up and why are we given warning signals about these thoughts. So many of you, while I was discussing the previous slide, might have started thinking, okay, so you're telling me that these thoughts are not important. Then why is our brain signaling us to consider these thoughts, or why are these thoughts suddenly coming to our mind? Now, our brain has many sections, many parts, but we'll be discussing about 3 of them here. That is the thalamus, cortex, and the amygdala. Now, the thalamus is the organ or is the part of the brain which is giving information, to explain in simple words. Now, the channel from thalamus to amygdala, as you can see, is a straight channel. So, information immediately goes from thalamus to amygdala. Now, if you have heard about research studies, you would know that amygdala has a role in regulating our emotions. It also has a role in understanding fear, associating with fear with other things, etc. Now, the cortex is the thinking part of our brain. So, for the information from thalamus to go to the cortex and then come to the amygdala, takes just half a second later, or even lesser than the straight road which we have given below. But by the time the information from the cortex arrives at the amygdala, the thalamus would have done its job in sending it directly to the amygdala, and the amygdala is giving you a fear signal, giving you a warning. Okay, this thought is coming up, you have to do something. And you can also kind of relate to how the thought from the cortex could be represented by your false comfort, where your false comfort starts saying, see, look at it in this way, or your wise mind when it says, why don't you sit back and think, why did this thought come? Or do not engage in the thought at all. So this is a simple process as to why we might be getting intrusive thoughts quicker than we expect, or why we might have the worry and fear attached to the intrusive thoughts. Now, after talking so much about intrusive thoughts, many of us might feel that, okay, the moment we start sensing that something like this is happening to us, all of us do a lot of research. Now, with loads of search engines, we all know where to go. Maybe some of us have read self-help books, watched videos, etc. But something is stopping us from changing our intrusive thoughts or not working on our intrusive thoughts. So the first thing is our sticky mind. Now, what happens is excessive stressors or extreme physical fatigue can make our mind extremely sticky to things, and our mind might not be letting these thoughts pass and might also be considering them important, giving them more regard than they actually require. Then we have the paradoxical effort. Remember the white rabbit example that we discussed? So paradoxical effort is because you're trying so hard to stop the thought keeps coming back to you. To give an example to this, let's say you have a bathtub in your house. Now you watch some movie where the bathtub is covered in blood, and the moment you drop yourself into the bathtub, you start feeling, oh, how nice it would be if I was covered in blood right now after killing somebody. And then every time, every single day, you want to go into your bathtub to take a bath, to take a relaxing shower, you start getting anxious and like, today I'm going to make sure that this thought doesn't come back to my mind again. And this extra effort is what's stopping you from not letting go of your intrusive thoughts, because you're somewhere reminding yourself of them again. The third part is entanglement. Now, when the thought comes to your mind and it passes, there's no engagement between you and the thought. But the moment your false comfort voice pops in, you realize that you've started engaging with the thought. Now, when you know that this thought is unwanted and uncontrollable, and you start engaging, the thing is that we start giving it more importance than it is actually required. Now, many of us might feel it does not happen consciously that way. Like, I'm not focusing on getting engaged with this thought, but I'm just naturally worried. Why is this thought coming to me? But again, not entangling also comes with practice, which we'll be learning about soon. But these are the three things which could probably be stopping us from overcoming our intrusive thoughts. Before we move on to our next slides, which are mostly comprising of certain techniques or strategies to overcome our intrusive thoughts, we'll discuss about how some strategies can be ineffective. Now, many say that reassuring ourselves about what's happening or this is not going to happen to us, we do not have to worry, is going to help. Or sometimes we also start seeking reassurance from the people outside us. That is, once your false comfort gives up, okay, I can't tell you anymore that this is not going to happen, maybe you start asking other people. Now, for example, let's say you have a bad stomach ache. Now, your false comfort stays, maybe it's acidity or maybe it's something else. You do not have to worry much. Probably drink some water, or if you that badly want, go to a doctor. But you do not want to do that. Instead, what you do is start seeking reassurance from your family members. You go to your mother, ask her, I'm getting a bad stomach ache. Do you think it could be ulcers? Do you think it could be kidney stones? And you then go to your dad, you go to your grandmother. So you keep asking for reassurance. And there are certain other ways too. So some people might say meditation is going to help, praying is going to help, exercise is going to help. Yes, all these help in regulating our thoughts, but not overcoming intrusive thoughts completely. But let's say I'm praying, and in the prayer hall or in the temple, or whichever the place of praying is, I get a sudden intrusive thoughts about what if I run away from this place while everybody is doing the prayers? It's going to be such fun. And then you start scolding yourself, start worrying again, okay, maybe I'm a very non-religious person, or maybe God's upset with me now, or what am I going to do? I've like earned the wrath of demons or something like that. So the thought loop keeps going on and on and on. And that is why these strategies, though many of us might have tried, wouldn't have helped us long term, because intrusive thoughts can pop up anytime, because a strategy so long has been wrong, which we'll be understanding in the next slide. So when we spoke about these strategies which do not benefit us a lot, what usually happens is every time we try to stop our thoughts, which is, as we already discussed, not under our control, which means it's not going to be that easy. Now, what do we do instead? We start with accepting our thoughts. Now, acceptance might sound like a very, funny solution to this entire thing. Like, what do you mean accept these really bad thoughts I'm having? I'm having the thought to kill a child, or I'm having the thought of dying myself, and you are asking me to accept these thoughts. How does this actually work? Now, to understand how does this work, we're going to move on to the steps of reducing distress that an intrusive thought can cause. Now, the first step is recognizing. So now what do you do in recognize? The thought comes to your mind. Now that you've understood what intrusive thoughts look like, what are the different types of intrusive thoughts, I'm sure that you're going to be able to recognize whenever an intrusive thought pops into your mind. Now, when you recognize, what happens is, you're halfway through because you've understood that this thought is not important. This thought has nothing to do with what you're feeling right now, or this thought has nothing to do with your actions, which might come later in your life. Now, with recognizing, we move to the second step, that is just thoughts. Now, what are just thoughts? This is giving yourself a reminder that these are thoughts, these do not indicate anything, you've got nothing to do with it, or these are just going to pass. Like, we have a millions of thoughts or more than that every day, and we do not start entangling with everything unless it's important to that particular situation. Again, to give an example here, now let's say you're in a quiz competition, and then they've given you a quiz question saying, in which city is the Eiffel Tower located? There are different cities given, starting with Paris, there's London, there's Delhi, and there's some other city. And suddenly the thought of you being on a trip to London with your friends comes to your mind. Now, this is not a thought that you'll entangle with at that moment, because the whole purpose there is for you to give the correct answer in the quiz. And similarly, you just let that thought pass because that was a nice memory. Pass. I'm going to go answer this question. And the third step comes in accepting and allowing the thought to be present. Now, when you start accepting that these are intrusive thoughts, or they have nothing much to do with your character or your inner self, you just allow these thoughts to be present. Now, we understood how paradox works. The more effort you put into not allowing them into your mind, the more they start coming up. But this time you accept it and you allow, okay, this is a passing thought that has been coming to my mind. Let me let it go, or let me allow it to stay there. And that is when we come to float and feel. Now that you've accepted the thought and the thought is in your mind, you do not do anything about it. You do not worry about it, you do not feel guilty about it, but you just allow the thought to float there. And you observe how you feel, you observe what's actually going on in your body, and you start observing how a simple thought is causing all these changes in your body. And the moment you remember that this thought is very irrelevant to your life, or unconstructive to your life, you start realizing how much time you've been spending on these thoughts. And then comes letting time pass. So we always have a sense of urgency to act on things. Now, the moment I've understood an intrusive thought has come to my mind, what do? I try to fight it back. No, I'm a good person. I can't be thinking about like this. What do you mean I'm going to hit people? This thought can never come to my mind. and I'm not giving it enough time to pass. Maybe if I give a second or 2 seconds more, the thought might just pass. And I might just say sorry to the person who bumped into me and walk on my way. But I'm worrying so much about the thought, which is making me spend more time on it, get entangled with it, and going on that cycle again. And the last step here is to proceed. Now you might have been doing something less, just like the example that we spoke about, where somebody bumps into you. When we're walking on the footpath and suddenly somebody bumps with you, you say sorry and you continue walking. Or if the person shouts at you, you just ignore them and continue walking. So you proceed with the task that you're already doing instead of standing there and worrying. Let's say even if the thought comes to your mind when the person shouts at you that, oh, I want to smack this person so bad. And you just do not stand there. You continue walking because that was just a thought and it needs to pass. So the moment we start, again, this is not entirely not engaging with the thought, but more about accepting how it's just a thought, and many such thoughts keep coming and you do not have to give importance or worry about all the thoughts. Now you're starting to try the steps, but do your intrusive thoughts just go away like that? Most of the times, no, because there are a lot of emotions involved here, and the top 3 things that we'll be speaking about here today is guilt, doubt, and urgency. Now, what happens is suddenly, the guilt of having such a thought comes to your mind, or you've been consciously working on your intrusive thoughts, and suddenly one day your false comfort, worried voice, wise mind, everything is speaking, and you're in that loop again. Now, sense of guilt might come back to you saying, okay, maybe I'm really a bad person, that things are not working for me. And this guilt is probably what's stopping you from continuing the process. Next, we have doubt. That is, you keep checking if the steps that you're taking is actually working on your intrusive thoughts. Now, let's take the step, accept and believe. So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to accept that the thought is coming to your mind. Maybe not try to push that thought back. Just be there with the thought. And now you're trying to check whether acceptance is actually helping you. And you start questioning, what would my false comforts would have said right now that I'm accepting the thought? And your false comfort actually pops up saying, you're not a bad person, you're a nice person. But that's not it, right? You go back into the worry loop again. And then there is urgency. That is, you want your intrusive thoughts to go away immediately, or the moment you start the process, you want it to start working very quickly. Now that I know everything, from tomorrow, I'm not going to have any intrusive thoughts. So that is the belief that most of us start with, which is going to make the process even more difficult. Now, there are also certain techniques which will help us follow these steps and which will help us overcome our intrusive thoughts better. Now, the first thing here is staying uncomfortable. Now, how do you stay uncomfortable? Now, in this summer, maybe putting a blanket on myself, putting a very thick leather jacket is also staying uncomfortable. But we are here talking about staying uncomfortable with your thoughts. Now, remember how we discussed about the amygdala? Now, you can't tell your amygdala that these are intrusive thoughts, so you need to learn to regulate them better, because amygdala is a system which processes on a different set of pathways. So what you have to do is, when you put yourself in the situation and give a new response, which is what we'll be talking about, emotional processing, you're going to give your amygdala new ways, or through inhibitory learning, you're going to be giving new ways for the amygdala to handle. Now, what happens in emotional processing exactly is that you have a fearful experience, and to change that, you make a corrective behavior. So when an intrusive thought comes, instead of going into the worry cycle, you go into rather telling yourself that this is just a thought. And that is how emotional processing will help you correct the process that the amygdala has always followed, and it also keeps in check with the triggering thoughts that are happening. Now, with inhibitory learning, what happens here is, so emotional processing is about more of changing the way you respond, but inhibitory learning is about learning newer pathways which can be used more frequently than the pathway that is usually used by you, which is the worried voice, false comfort. We have a new way instead, that is flow, accepting, and proceeding with your work. Now, to give an example for inhibitory learning, uh, I think all of us know that we can write both with a pencil and with a pen. So once we started writing with a pencil, we all know that that was the only thing. As kids, pencil was the only thing we were allowed to take to school, so we were writing with it. And then came pen. And we all know, since we have started using pen, we do not use pencil as much unless we have to draw a diagram, draw tables or something like that. Now here, the pathway of writing, which is using pencil, is not entirely away from our life at all. We are using it in some situation, or we want to scribble something down, quick notes or something, we still use our pencil. But we have found a better pathway to keep our written records more permanent, that is using the pen. Similarly, when we are practicing inhibitory learning, one thing that we have to be careful about is, despite practicing the new pathways or despite learning to tackle with your intrusive thoughts, you might still get into the loop once again. But that should not be stopping you from thinking or make you start thinking that this is not going to work, or there's something wrong with yourself, or there's something wrong with your mind, etc. The next thing that we have is practicing. Remember how we spoke about getting uncomfortable, putting ourselves in the situation, that is, forcing ourselves to think about that intrusive thoughts. Now, planned practice is when you actually get the intrusive thought to your mind. So you know a certain set of intrusive thoughts that keep coming to your mind. Now, let's say most of the intrusive thoughts that I get to my mind are nonsensical. That is, if I do not write 5, 10 times or something, or if I see some numbers on a board, something wrong is going to happen to me, or I'm going to jump in front of the car which has this particular number. So this is again very nonsensical. Like, why would I jump in front of a car, and where would I find a car with a particular number? So I bring this thought of jumping in front of a car in a busy road and then try to practice staying with it. Incidental practice is when I'm trying to cross the road and suddenly a lot of cars are coming and the thought comes to my mind. So if a car with the number 1, 2, 3, 4 comes in front of you, jump. Now this is incidental because the thought is something that is coming without you getting it, or without you consciously making an effort to think about it. And then you try to stay with the feeling, accept that, okay, just because my mind tells me to jump, I do not have to. It is just a thought. And look on both sides of the road, look at the traffic light and cross the road. So these are certain techniques that is going to help us in the process of overcoming our intrusive thoughts. Now we've understood that there are techniques to work on intrusive thoughts, and we're not alone in this process. But let's also see what can start happening once we are in a good place away from our intrusive thoughts. The first thing that we'll be speaking about is the recovery process. Now, when recovery happens, we are more mindful about what's happening around us. We understand how we have been unnecessarily entangling with our thoughts so much. We have learned to accept it, we've learned to sit with it, and we have learned to not give it the reassurance it seeks, or not give it the importance that it seeks. But during every recovery process, there are high chances that there might be setbacks. Now, what happens exactly during setbacks is that, remember how we discussed in certain techniques, the thought might actually come back to your mind and you might engage in worrying again. So similarly, there might be times when you experience intrusive thoughts, or new intrusive thoughts might start coming up. So let's say for a person who was seeking professional help for intrusive thoughts related to dying, now has intrusive thoughts related to killing. Now with this setback, there is a sense of demoralization and fear where they feel, okay, I have to be a really bad person, and all these days the feeling of dying was just about killing other people, and I was just trying to convince myself that I was a good person and I would never do something like that. And there might also be other feelings of hopelessness, of how I've tried everything. Okay, I learned a new set of techniques. I thought this will help me, but even this is not helping me. Or the feelings of, why is this happening to me? Maybe I'm really a bad person, I'm just not recognizing it, or maybe I'm being punished for something that I've done. So these are the setbacks. Now we know the recovery phase and the setback phase. We'll end the discussion by talking about professional help. Now, again, when we spoke about setbacks, many a times you can go back into using these techniques when these setbacks are happening, or even when a setback happens, when you know about it, you can confidently feel, yes, now I'm in the process of learning that these intrusive thoughts are not as important as I thought they were, and setbacks are going to come, but I'll continue working on it as long as possible. Now, this is where the step of professional help comes. Now, we spoke a lot about thoughts related to morally wrong things or thoughts related to dying. Now, these can also be related to certain disorders that are present. Now, for example, a person getting thoughts related to dying, sometimes me experiencing depression or some other disorder with suicidal ideations. Now, when such thoughts come and they're not really uncomfortable with it or distressed, or the question of why am I even getting this thought comes to their mind, it is always better to seek professional help, because these might not just be intrusive thoughts, but more than that. Similar things go about when we discussed about sexual orientation. If an individual is very distressed about the feelings that they're experiencing, it might lead on to other disorders. So they might go to a queer affirmative therapist, or a therapist who has good understanding about sexual identity and orientation, learn from them, learn about the different sexualities, and then try to position themselves somewhere. And then comes other disorders where pedophilia or other kinds of paraphilic or sexual disorders are included. Now, thoughts about sexually assaulting somebody or harming somebody might also be coming as intrusive thoughts, but when these are repeatedly coming, or when the individual starts feeling, I'm actually enjoying the thoughts that are coming to my mind, they're not even making me feel uncomfortable, it might be indicating a disorder. It might or might not, but seeking professional help in all these situations is a better choice. Even with intrusive thoughts, again, many a times these techniques might not be known to us, or we might not have enough awareness about the different modes of tackling with intrusive thoughts. So seeking professional help, or if the person feels that they're very alone, or they feel very hopeless about the thoughts that they're getting, it's always better to seek professional help. And with that, we come to an end of this entire session on overcoming intrusive thoughts. And with this, you can also refer to certain readings, certain articles, research articles published on intrusive thoughts to know that you're not alone in this process, and there are professionals out there to help you, and there are things that you can try for yourself to make yourselves feel better. Thank you.